We have this morning two gentlemen here in the studio. Bulus Atsen is the chairman of the Nigeria Bar Association here in Abuja. And then we also have with us Mr. Usman Baba Ngerzama, who is the national secretary of the Miyetti Ala Cattle Breeders Association of Nigeria. Gentlemen, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having us.
Well, quite a bit of background to provide to our viewers this morning, but I think it's very important that they understand the context, even though I imagine that those who have been following the news would have been able to, put into context what is happening. But just in case anyone has missed any part, this is a situation that we have today. Lagos State has joined a number of states that have passed the anti-open grazing bill into law. Let me first of all ask you, Sir Baba Ngerzama, how, because I do know that I think it was your association that made an appeal to the Lagos State government. Was it your own association? Because we do know that there's Miyetti Ala Kauta Hore and there's yours. Are they a faction of your group, or how is your relationship with them?
No, it's never a faction. It's a duly registered association, just like the Magban. Though we have large followership, and we are in existence for nearly 40 years now. And ours is a democratic one. We came in through election, and we definitely go out through election. But the other group are there, duly registered by the CSE. We always wonder why the CSE will even accept to register in the same name for the same purpose. But because the security situation, what our members are going through now, is what concerns us. So in-house fighting is not our priority now. All we want to see is how our members can coexist peacefully with the farmers across the country, because Magban has branches in the 36 states of the Federation and in most of the local governments. So we have members living across every part of Nigeria for decades. In fact, some were born and brought up there. I can correct the minds of some Yoruba leaders who misquoted me, and the other time I granted interview to Arise TV, alleging that I want to claim my members of Fulanis to claim the Yoruba ancestral land. I've never said that. All I said that was there are Fulanis whose parents were born and brought up in those areas. Go to Ogun and Oyo, you find a lot of them there who only understand Yoruba and Fulfulde. Does that make them Southerners? No. They know they are Northerners, and they are seen as one, and they know they are one. They are Northerners. It's just like the Igbos we have living in Kano, and the Yorubas we have living in Plateau and Kano. They are there. Their parents were born there. They are brought up there. But does that make them Northerners? No. They see themselves as Southerners, no matter how long they will stay there. And the entire community also sees them as Southerners. But the fact that they were born and brought up there, that makes them indigenous of those areas. Let me give you an example. I have one family in my village in Geldarma, where I was born and brought up. I have a family of Adele Ainde. I grew up and saw them there. We attended the same primary school with the children. Adele was my mate. We attended the same primary school. He went to Damatru Secondary School. He was given indigent of my local government, Fune and Geldarma. He later died after graduating and taking the service of the custom. But Tony and Bose are still living in Geldarma. They have enjoyed our indigenship. They have taken the employment of our local government. They are still there. Tony has already retired, but she's still living in Geldarma, speaking her Yoruba language, practicing her Christian religion. Can we allow somebody to go and touch her today? No, we see her as one of us. She's still living there with her children, and Bose too. They are there. So, but that notwithstanding, did this make them Northerners? No. They still see themselves as Southerners, Yorubas from the South. We also see them as one. But that does not stop us from recognizing them as our own indigenous, because we grew up together, we saw them there. So
It's a tricky one because I do know that that's something that has been a bone of contention in many instances in Nigeria. You know, people have said that we should ditch indigenship and, you know, embrace residency as the way to recognize where people are from. But I mean, that we'll see how that influences this particular discussion. What I'd like to know is what. How this, when the Southern governors reached their resolution, what were the immediate reactions of your own association?
Well, you see, we as civilized people, we know that the state governors have the responsibility of their areas. We know that they are the chief security officers of their state, and we know that the Land Tenure Act rested the power for utilization of land to governors, to those states. We very much know that, and we very much know that the houses of assembly in respective states are responsible for making laws affecting the socio-economic activities of that particular state. We all know this as civilized people. So where a law is made by a body that is constitutionally recognized to make laws, what can you say? Whether good or bad, the law is there. But the processes is what we always have problems. In the processes, if a law is going to be made in a particular community, that law is supposed to bring peace and harmony. That is why laws are made in communities, to foster peace and harmony in that particular community. So, and those that can be affected by the law, directly or indirectly, are normally invited for dialogue under what you call it public hearing, so that they can also view their own interests, they can make people understand how they live, how they practice their trade, so that they can also be, the activity can also be protected by that law. But in most places where the law is made, our members are not taken alone as critical stakeholders, because the anti-open grazing law directly affects our members. So where they are going to be affected as Nigerians, I think their interests must also be covered by the law to some extent.
So what I understand is that you're saying you didn't get any invitation from the state governments?
In some of the states,
yes,
our members are invited, but in Lagos in particular, I saw our members attending the public hearing. But you know, Lagos has a peculiar problem, because you don't find a lot of pastoralists in Lagos. I think we have them in not more than 1, 2, 3 local governments. But the cow merchants normally buy cow in their large numbers, bring them to Lagos, keep them in the forest. After 2, 3 months, they bring them to the market and sell. And those are not necessarily Fulanis. Though Miyetti Allah Cattle Breeder Association is for every cattle breeder across the country, whether you are Fulani or not. If you take our card to become a member, you automatically become our member if you rear cattle. So you find a lot of these merchants keeping cows in outskirts of Lagos. Then after a while, they bring them to the market and sell. Lagos law has invited our members as critical stakeholders to come and air their views. So we are now waiting for the outcome and seeing whether the interests of those members are protected or not. Secondly, people are talking of ranching. We are never opposed to any form of settlement that can bring peace, because we know settling the pastoralists is the only way out of this crisis we have. Because you cannot continue with what you are doing 50 years back and still continue to do it today in the modern world of today. That means there's no progress. So we know that change is necessary. Change is always there for us, whether we like it or not. So, but you have a pastoralist society that has not changed from the primitive system of animal husbandry that is practicing 50 years back, is still doing the same thing. Why? It's not his own fault, because there was no attempt by the first succeeding administration to try to modernize, to teach them how to teach him how to modernize his trade. So he's still practicing the only thing he knows and the only thing he believes in doing, roaming the wild, looking for free pasture. But this era is about to be over now, considering the growth in population of both animal and human beings against a land that doesn't increase. So there has to be a way on how to plan these things for the pastoralists and the farmers to coexist peacefully. And ranching has so many models. Let me give you an example of one. The New Zealand ranch model. They call it Maori land settlement model. That Maori land settlement model involves the development of the entire grazing reserve, so leaving the pastoralists to continue to live in their traditional local setting, but within a confined area that is called ranch, where pasture and no water will be provided. So there are so many models to ranch. It's not, most of our pastoralists are smallholder farmers. They cannot afford to go for the modern ranch that everybody is looking for in this country. They don't have the education, they don't have the skills, and even the number of the cows they have cannot allow them to venture into this type of modern ranching that we always agitate for, because it's capital intensive. How many cows do they have? All these cows that you see, 100, 200, with families living, moving with them, belongs to the entire family. If it is going to be shared, nobody will get more than 50 cows out of that number, because they inherited it, and they also want to die and leave more cows for their family, for their children to also inherit, because they don't bloody care with the quality of the cow. What they care much is the quantity, because they got them through inheritance, so they want to die and leave more cows for their children to also inherit, because your society your status in the society you live is always determined by the number of cows you have. The more cows you have, the more big man you become in the society you live. So these are things that the public must know.
Indeed, and certainly must put in context as the conversation proceeds. So let me ask you, Mr. Atsen, because even though Mr. Ngazarma has, differentiated his own association from the other association, Miyetti ala Kautahore, we cannot dismiss, how will I put it now, the words of the other Miyetti ala group that have threatened to sue. Perhaps, we can listen to parts of that particular, of the conversation, of the press conference which they granted, threatening to sue the states, saying that what they were doing was illegal. They had some pretty strong words for the states. I'm wondering, as a lawyer, when you saw that particular track, how did it hit you?
Well, first we need to put the issues in proper perspective. The State House of Assembly, which seeks to enact a law banning or restricting open grazing, just as Mr. Usman said, is doing so within its constitutional powers. And if there are people or group of people who feel strongly, or however convicted they are, that the law infringes on their rights as citizens of Nigeria, they reserve the right to go to court. So if going to court is the option that they've taken, I will say kudos to them. That's the right thing to do. However, talking about the law banning open grazing reserve, open grazing, it's something that is a long time coming. It didn't just happen. There are issues which precipitated the enactment of this law. Benue State enacted it since 2017. It was clear that so many other states were going to take a cue from that if the issues that encouraged Benue to take that path continued in those other states. So it wasn't surprising when the southern states governors came together and decided on this path as a solution to the myriads of crises that were generated as a result of open grazing. So going to court, to me, it's okay.
Yeah, but I do not know if you saw that particular video. Did you see it?
Yes, I saw it. I watched it.
I mean, the language was a bit aggressive. Do you think that it was, does it already say what is going to happen in court, for instance? I mean, and the stance and the mode, or let's say the mood of those who are going to court. I don't know, because this is supposed to bring peace. It's supposed to be a solution to a problem. Lives have been lost. Conflict keeps on, keeps happening. People are displaced from their homes. Properties are burnt and lost and this is happening amongst farmers, it's happening amongst herdsmen. We've had to question whether this is just a local problem or whether this has an international face to it, or maybe this is also being fueled from some other areas. So if this is the solution which the governors are proposing, and this is also the vehemence you're getting on some other parts in terms of the language of going to court, do you really think that this is going to bring the proposed peace which this law is supposed to enforce?
Well, in most cases, change doesn't come easily. There are bound to be some resistance. There are bound to be objections and protests from here and there. The Miyetti Allah groups, both the Cattle Breeders Association and the Kautal Hore group, over the years, in my view, have not really engaged critical stakeholders in the area of cattle rearing, with the view to finding solutions to the crisis that have come up over the years. In most cases, what you see is stiff resistance, just as the Kautal Hore group is posing. So instead of engaging stakeholders with the view to finding a holistic solution, they usually take a combative position. It is just of recent that you find the cattle that's Magban engaging with governors, trying to find solution. Like in the case of Lagos, they're pleading for more time to educate their members on how to rear cattle, either in ranching or in reserves or whatever name you call it. But in most cases, you see a stiff resistance, threats, and use of all kinds of foul and uncouth language.
So this is the situation right now in Lagos, where, at least you did admit that you did see Makban there, and they asked for more time. That doesn't seem to have been taken into consideration, given that now the law has been passed. If this is really supposed to bring peace, how do you think enforcement will not cause conflict?
Well, it will depend. The fact that the law will be made anytime soon does not necessarily mean that, how do you put it now, that it can have a transition phase, let's say within a span of 6 months, 10 months, or 1 year. This and this and this will be done. So that will give time for the pastoralist. I mean, that will take into consideration the plea or the request of Magban to give their members opportunity to be acquainted with modern practices of either ranching or being stationed in grazing areas, as it were.
Well, I'm just a little curious. For the states that have passed this anti-open grazing law, how has it been for your members operating in those states? We understand a number of them have had to leave to other states, but if it's going to now happen in the generality of southern states, how is that going to impact the productivity of your members and the businesses? Because some people also say that this is also culture of your members.
And this is the question we always ask. How our members are going to be treated if a law is passed by a particular state, because we had the bitter experience of Benue. Has the law in Benue solved the problem? Up till today, we have conflict in Benue. So that means the law has not solved the problem, because the Benue law says I and to open grazing prohibition and ranching establishment. So two things are involved there: the establishment of ranches and the ban on open grazing. So one must come before the other. So ideally, the ranching establishment has to come first before you enforce. But what we saw in Benue right from the onset was the enforcement, was even setting the machinery for the establishment of ranches. So that put us into what we have today in Benue State, crisis after crisis. Farmers and pastoralists losing their lives, losing their properties and everything that they have. For years, IDPs are maintained in Benue. People are not allowed to go and farm. And you know, Benue is a farming state. They depend very much in farming, just like the pastoralists also depend in cattle rearing. So the law is never a win-win situation, as Autumn said when he was implementing the law. He said it is going to be a win-win. Who is winning in Benue today? Are the farmers winning from that law, or the pastoralists? Both of them are suffering. Both of them are losing lives and properties. So the law did not solve the problem. So this is what we are cautioning the other southern governors to understand. Go and appraise the Benue law and see, has it helped in solving the problem? It has not.
There are two states that passed the law at that time, Benue and Ekiti. The situation is not as complex in Ekiti.
It's not complex in Ekiti, because in Ekiti, during the time of 5G, we were there. They understood the dynamics of the crisis. They understood who the pastoralist is. They know that is a person that is not educated and he's practicing the only thing that he knows. So Ekiti, I think, has tried to take into consideration the plights of the pastoralists, like Ogun and Osun. Osun also, even without the law, Osun is peaceful, because the governor has done so many things that involves the participation of both farmers and herders and the security agencies in all the local governments. When conflicts arises, there is a committee that always mitigates immediately between the two. So these are the involvements that we always call for, because these pastoralists, whether we like it or not, are Nigerians. They are not foreign pastoralists, they are Nigerians. They move to the southern parts of the country, not intentionally to go and stay there, but in search of pasture and water, because all the grazing reserves we have are located in the northern part of the country. About 415 of them are all located in the northern part of the country, covering about 5 million hectares of land. They are all located in the northern part of the country. But the fact that they are not maintained very well, the water is not there, and the palatable grass that the cow consumes is giving way to unpalatable ones because of lack of maintenance of the grazing reserves. Because normally the cows come out hungry from the dry season. So with the second week of rainfall, immediately the new grasses begin to come out. They were forced to go and feast on new grasses, and by feasting on them, they remove them from their roots. So they are not allowing them to drop seeds for next season. So this made the grazing reserve bare. The palatable grasses are giving way to unpalatable ones. The dams that are there are silted. They no longer hold water. So this forced the pastoralists to move in search of water and pasture. That is what took them to the southern part of the country, where they can find water. So if those grazing reserves can be developed, we know settlement is the only option. We always say it. Settling the pastoralists is the only option for them to also enjoy, like any other Nigerian, to enjoy the social amenities, to enjoy pump water, to enjoy education, to enjoy electricity. But the way they are living now, they live in the forest, vulnerable place, open for attack by all sorts of things. And they live with the entire family there, with all they have in this world. So you cannot expect a person living with all he has, the cow and everything, the family, everything he has, living in the forest. You cannot expect this guy to go and cause problem for him to be killed, or his cow also killed. So, I mean, people should understand the dynamics of this crisis. People should understand the type of pastoralists we have in this country. People will have to understand how they operate as the only thing they know, because there was no attempt by the past administration to try to modernize that trade. So they are doing the only thing that they know.
Yeah. Let me come to Mr. Atsenwa now, because I see you, Atsen rather, I see you, you know, shaking your head, and I do not know whether it is in terms of what he's saying or is it in terms of the context, because it does seem like in some cases this law has been passed, and as he pointed out, conflict still remains. If you were to advise a governor based on you know, some of the difficulties and perhaps maybe the experiences that we've seen for the states who passed it far earlier on, what were some of the changes? What would you have recommended, saying, as they were passing the law, in order to bring true and lasting peace?
Okay, first, let me correct an impression that Mr. Usman has been making, which is that previous administrations have not taken any steps to change the way of life or the worldview of the pastoralist. In 1989, the government at the time created the National Commission for Nomadic Education. And if you look at the functions of that commission in its establishment law, it provides for a holistic reorientation of the pastoralist. And interestingly, I stand to be corrected, but the commission all along has been headed by people who understand the way of life of the pastoralist. Some of them have passed through that phase and have what it takes to help affect or influence the change in the worldview of the pastoralists, but that hasn't been achieved. You would want to ask, has the commission been funded over the years? What has it done? What are the achievements it has made? What landmarks can we identify as an evidence of its discharging its duties?
So this was not because the Nigerian government didn't see that this could be a potential problem in future when they created that agency. The problem is that, as with most government agencies, it is either underfunded or, you know, attention was shifted away to other issues. So should we hold government responsible for this?
Absolutely. The government has the primary responsibility for the protection of lives and property, for the provision of welfare for the citizens. And a structure was put in place for that purpose by the creation of the commission, but it hasn't lived up to its expectations. And I doubt if it is still doing that. I mean, just look at it in all these conversations. We've not taken into account that particular commission. Interestingly, a particular section of the Act states that the commission could create some kind of a stakeholder committee, some technical committee which involves Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Culture and Tourism, Information, which will liaise with state governments for the purposes of addressing some of the concerns that the members have raised in terms of giving attention to the pastoralists, settling them down in some kind of a ranch or things like that. But how have we achieved that? That was why I talked about organizations like MAGBAN not engaging with state governments productively. In most cases, it's combative. I mean, just look at the interview that was granted by the Miyetti Allah Kautal Hore group. With all that they have said, have they created room for some kind of productive engagement with, let's say, the government of Ondo State? The answer is no.
Let's quickly flip this to my colleague in Lagos. He has questions.
Well, thank you, Mark. Let me begin with Mr. Ngezama, because I get a sense that perhaps there is little understanding between both parties. So, I mean, and I'd like to know if you perhaps appreciate or understand the position of the governors. So you say that, well, they've not taken into consideration the plight of the pastoralists. And for the governors, they say, well, these laws essentially are meant to ensure that there's security, at least a law that defines the rules of engagement, rules of business, essentially. So it's meant to provide security, ensure some decorum or some order in the way the business is conducted, and of course have some form of ramifications when there are infractions. So do you understand or appreciate the position of the state governors? I mean, they are meant to be chief security officers in their state. They're essentially meant to be on top of any situation, and security has been a major issue, especially as a result of those conflicts we've seen between pastoralists and farmers. So I just want to know, do you fully appreciate the position of the state governors, the southern state governors, I should say?
Well, long as they are doing it objectively, we'll have no cause to not to agree with them. But where behind the law is politics, it's not going to provide the solution required. The governors have met, they have voiced out their intentions, and some have even started doing it. If you can follow me some days back, when they started this thing, I called on the northern governors to open discussion with their southern counterparts, so that together, because all the pastoralists are supposed to be northerners, coming from the north to the southern part of the country. So if the southern governors are uniting on behalf of their people, why can't the northern governors also come together and discuss with their southern counterparts? Say, hey, these guys, this thing that we have started, this is the way we are going to do it, because you also have your indigenous living in the northern part of the country doing their legitimate business. Cow is not like a merchandise that you can put in a store and lock. Cow is an animal. It's an animal. It needs water and food to survive on daily basis. So cow is not something that you can lock up and say, it's all right for my merchandise, I will sell it at the time I like. Cow requires attention and feeding. Leaders have responsibilities on animals too, the way they have responsibilities on human beings as well. So this will say the northern governors can, why didn't they come together with their southern counterparts? After all, they have a forum that is being chaired by the governor of Ekiti State. He is the chairman, Nigerian Governors Forum. Why can't they, under this forum, try to sort out their things so that they could come with something common that can work for both farmers and herders across the country? Something that will create peace once and for all, by understanding
again, Mr. Ngazama,
the plight and the system of trade of both farmers and herders. I say this, the dynamics of Nigerian pastoralists are not well understood by the
Mr. Ngazama, I'll still stay with this point of understanding between both parties. So I get a sense that you think that this law is meant to lock up the cattle, because you say cattle cannot be locked up. I'm sure you've looked through those laws. Is there any part that says cattle is meant to be locked up in those laws? I hope you got me, Mr. Ngazama.
So a law banning open grazing is in place now. So what other contingencies do they have for the pastoralists in the interim?
Sorry, forgive me, Mr. Ngazama, just so that we can, forgive me, I didn't quite get your answer from the start. So please, if you could just go over it again so we put this in proper context. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Ngazama, can you hear me?
Because both of them, both the farmers and are suffering from it. But if the
audio keeps going back and forth. Help me out here, Mr. Ngazama. Please go ahead with your response.
Do you want?
Go ahead.
Hear me?
I can hear you now. Okay, the question is, understanding yet again, which I started with. You say that cattle cannot be locked up. I just want to be clear on that one. Is there any part in the laws across the states that says your cattle should be locked up?
If you come up with a law that bans open grazing, how do you expect the pastoralists to move away with their source of livelihood? How do you expect them to survive in those states? What have you in place for them, at least before the full implementation of this law? They should be confined in a particular area for grazing, at least, for them to understand fully the dynamics of the law before they could venture into it. Whoever refuses to venture into it, a law is there. Penalty.
Okay. So you're saying that the laws, pardon me, so you're saying the law does not say lock your cattle up.
Guidelines
forgive me, if I could just come in here. So you're saying that the laws don't say lock the cattle up, but you agree that the laws say at least do some form of ranching, at least put them in a space. So are you against ranching?
What type of ranching?
Ranching is, I mean, I think the definition
ranching
is quite
has so
clear.
many models. What type of ranching?
Okay, so what model
I told you
are
earlier,
you for?
Yeah, I can hear you. You say what?
Yes. I said, what model of ranching? How do you understand ranching?
Models. There's the one that involves the owner getting land, providing his own pasture and water in that land, which is capital intensive. All the pastoralists we have in the country are smallholder farmers who cannot afford the capital intensive system of ranching. But I earlier on spoke about the New Zealand ranching model that involves the development of the entire forest for the pastoralists to continue to live in their local settings, but don't dare go out of that area that is confined as a ranch. Government can do that. Government can begin to even get revenue from this system. Let them convert their forests into these big ranches so that pastoralists will be paying some sort of amount to the government so that they will continue to stay in that forest doing their the only thing that they know. Then gradually, when they understand fully how the modern ranch can be done, then they can gradually begin to acquire their own land, move into the other system of ranching for them to have their land, their few cows that are productive against the ones that they have today. We have a cow that gives an output of 3 liters of milk at most, against the ones that we have in the world that are giving 50 liters of milk per cow per day. They still maintain a cow that is weighing not more than 100 or 120 kilograms of weight, against the ones that we have in the world that are weighing 500, 600 to 700 kilograms, that give more milk, that give more meat. If they know these things, they will definitely gradually venture into it. And this will solve their problem. They will not be moving. Their children will go to school. They will enjoy all the other social amenities like any other Nigerian. They will come over this. But this thing has to come as a process. You will not expect today there is a law, tomorrow stop rearing cattle. So where will they go to? What provision have you for them in the interim? For them to understand the law,
I think the laws are quite clear.
It bans to understand the benefits.
Okay, so I think essentially, maybe at the root of this for me, I think is understanding. Perhaps I might be wrong. And I think the laws are quite clear. The laws are banning open grazing, and that's having cattle on the roads, you know, in residential areas, as we have seen and we continue to see from time to time, and also to not have those cattle cross over into the farmlands of farmers, which has been a root cause of insecurity in a lot of areas. So I think the laws are quite clear on that, but the laws do not ban pastoralists from doing their business. It essentially tries to put up a framework. So from what you say, are you saying that pastoralists do not want to acquire land for ranching, for doing their business?
They will given the right opportunity. I told you most of the pastoralists we have in the country are smallholder farmers. those 200-300 cows that you see family moving with them belongs to the entire family. If it is going to be shared, nobody will get more than 50 cows as his own. So with 50 cows, how are you going to establish a ranch with 50 cows? It's something that you don't know how to do it, you are not educated on it. How are you going to do it? So all that, well, if the law is about stopping cows from encroaching into farms, from roaming the streets in the cities, it's very good. We're always against this type of things. But let them be confined to a particular area where they will be grazing their cows, not encroaching into people's farmlands. Let these southern governors understand the dynamics of these guys. Let them know that they are also Nigerians. They have their rights and privileges to be protected, just like the farmers. Let there be a system that can create understanding. Well, encroachment into farmlands is very wrong, because the farm to the farmer is dear, just like the cow is dear to the owner of the cow. So if you allow your cow to go and make destruction into somebody's farm, we're always against it. Where we get them, we compel them to pay for that damage, because we will not allow this to happen as an association. So
but clearly, it seems
if the
that
law is about stopping these things, then we will have no quarrel with the law at all. But where the law is just like that of Benue State, that was promulgated with the intention, we believe, to chase out pastoralists out of Benue, this is our fears. This is always our fears, because we have seen a law in Benue that has not solved the problem up to today that we speak.
You know, Mr. Gazama, we've seen policies of government banning, for example, hawking on the major roads. I mean, in Lagos, for example, there have been those policies banning motorcycles, at least a certain grade, from plying certain routes in the state. So we've seen some of those things essentially saying there are other ways to do your business. So for the motorcycles, there's a certain grade of motorcycle you have to get if you want to ply those routes. And I mean, we've seen people switching up, as it were. And for those who couldn't, they just moved away thinking, well, it is a law. I don't want to be caught breaking the law. So I'd like to know squarely now from you, as it stands, for example, with this law that is being developed in Lagos, would your members be abiding by that law?
Are cows supposed to be roaming the street in the cities? No. It's very wrong for cows to stray into somebody's farm deliberately and cause problem, or to be moving in the streets. It's very, very wrong. Let them be confined to a particular area where they will be rearing their cattle. We are against all these kind of things. If the law is about solving this kind of things, then we will have no problem with the law. But our fear is we had our bad experiences about the Benue law, where up till today, it has not solved the problem in Benue. So we fear the other southern governors not to emulate the Benue State law. But if it is a law that is peculiar with their environment, that can confine the pastoralists in a particular area where they will be grazing, get them in their large numbers, begin to improve their skills, begin to teach them how the modernized animal husbandry is being practiced today, then gradually as a process, they will learn. If they learn, I am sure they will not want to waste their time living in the forest with their children and everything, vulnerable area open for attack. They won't do that. They will also want their children to go to school just like any other. I am now here today by the grace of God because I went to school. Destiny brought me to where I am today. If not, I would have been supposed to be rearing my cow in the cattle, my cattle in the forest by now. But destiny, education, my parents put me in the school, so I am here today in channels, granting interview. So they all want to do this. How many pastoralist children today are in the offices in Abuja of the states working as civil servants? Doctors, engineers, mention anything, you find a Fulani man in it. So,
right.
So they all desire for these things, but because this thing that they are practicing is the only thing that they know as a source of livelihood for them to do. Let the southern governors understand this.
Is it
if the law is about solving, roaming the streets, stressing into farmlands, we are against these things. We don't like them. But
so correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gazama. Are you saying
in the northern part of the country? I'm coming.
Okay, I need to take this to Mr. Atsen very soon, just so we can have a balanced conversation. Pardon me, but are you saying that your members will? I mean, your members abiding by this law is conditional? Because you keep saying if. Is it conditional, or you'll go with it pending perhaps some sort of court ruling against it?
The problem with you media, you always want to put something into somebody's mouth. You don't want to be objective. You understood this thing very well, but still you are trying to create something that can give another impression to the public.
Well, Mr. Ngazama, I don't think that is fair, because I asked a yes or no question earlier on.
And we protect the interests of our members who are the peaceful ones. We have no business with any criminal in this country.
Okay,
this is an association that has prominent, respected traditional rulers as board of trustees.
I understand, but I don't think that's fair. I essentially asked a straight question.
We fear a situation where our members will be put into an unnecessary prostration and loss, where they will become vulnerable for attack by youth, because a guy hiding under a law that is promulgated against open grazing. So next time you see youth and some communities beginning to attack pastoralists in those areas, but where it is very clear that there is a law stopping this and that. You pastoralists, for now, you are confined to this particular area to go and stay peacefully. Don't dare stress into somebody's farm. If you do that, this is the penalty. Don't dare roam the street in the cities. If you do that, this is the penalty. We'll come close to the government and help the government in achieving this, because we are not criminals. We are peaceful people. We are civilized. We represent those pastoralists who are peaceful doing their legitimate business. We don't speak for criminals because we are not one. But because our members are everywhere in this country, that is why we always diplomatic in our presentation. We always guide our statements, because we don't want to make statements that will put our members living in those areas into unnecessary troubles. So we always try to create understanding. We always try to be objective in what we are doing. We always try to create understanding so that the governors in those areas can understand that our members are not violent. Our members are there looking for faster for their hearts. If a government can come up with something that can fetch revenue for her, we are not against it. I am from Yobe State. Yobe State has promulgated cattle tax now.
Mr. Ngazama, well, I hope you will not say that the media again is cutting you short, but we need to take this back to Mr. Atsen. And I essentially wanted us to leave with a sense that at least we understand your position. So moving forward, we can have at least a well-rounded conversation. But Mr. Atsen, you've been following this conversation, and it will appear to me, at least, that there's some lack of understanding, at least understanding the positions of the parties. So, I mean, the pastoralists have their view of these laws, why these laws are being promulgated, thinking, I mean, there's some political undertone to it and the rest. And the governors, of course, have their views as well. Is there a way around this in law?
Well, just as was stated earlier on, the governors have a responsibility as chief security officers to bring about or make policies that will bring about the peace and order and good governance of their various states. And we have identified open grazing as one of the threats to security in most states of the Federation. But we've not really situated the solution in proper perspective or within its proper context. Now, in the course of discussions here, it was established that there are grazing areas up north, even though some of them are forest reserves, which are misconstrued to be grazing areas. But yes, there are grazing reserves which have been abandoned, which are in the state of decay. Now, what we should be agitating our minds on is how to revive these areas, as the president has directed, and settle some of these pastoralists there. If you look at the map of Nigeria, there's more space up north than down south. As you go down southward, the maps keeps shrinking. Land is more scarce downward than upward. So why can't we take advantage of these resources that we have up north rehabilitate these areas. The cattle have used or grazed on the areas up north, and they have moved down south without doing much more. I mean, we're going to have a repeat in the south, what we now have in the north. Because with time, they will overgraze and finish all the forest. And some of these forests are protected resources. So maybe instead of hammering on southern governors, pushing all the responsibilities and blame on them, focus should be made on the northern governors, on the northern states. You have a responsibility. You're more affiliated to this. Most of the pastoralists that will be affected culturally and in so many ways. So they should be charged to rise up to their responsibilities and provide all these structures so that some of these concerns will be addressed. I mean, Magban in Lagos made a statement to the effect that if this law is put in place, that the cost of a cow will get up to about 2 million naira or so. I mean, that is business. If I, as a state governor, let's say in Kaduna or Katsina State, invest money in creating a grazing area, I should be able to charge some kind of tax or something before a cow will be moved from my state to, let's say, Ebonyi State or Ogun State. So if that will come to 1 million per cow, in my mind, it's better than the lives that are being lost on a daily basis, destruction of properties, and lack of harmony. I mean, right now, as we talk, we didn't talk about the banditry that has crippled activities completely in states like Katsina and Zamfara. All this started as a result of cattle rustling, clashes with farmers, and all those things. That was how it started. But today we have a security threat that is, as we speak, much more than Boko Haram threats as far as banditry, terrorism basically is concerned. So we need to look at these issues from the foundations instead of touching on its branches.
Just to say also that we did invite a member of the Lagos State House of Assembly, but he wasn't able to make it to the program. And it's to give a perspective into the thinking of the Lagos State government in terms of their passage and also perhaps explain how they intend to cover the challenges faced by the cattle breeders who will be most affected by the law which has just been passed in Lagos. But gentlemen, I don't know if we still have time for closing words. It looks like we're totally out of time. But I want to ask, because you have said that if this was just about restricting movement to a certain area and not, prohibiting people from, especially the cattle, from coming into the city, that it would have been more understandable. Someone will say that in Abuja, for instance, the FCT, which is especially in the heart of the FCT, we still see cattle roaming around. I mean, what is the engagement like with your members when it comes to, the herding of cattle within the city center?
Those cattle that you see in the city center belongs to the big men in this town. They do not belong to the pastoralists, because we have been working with FCT for years to stop these things. And whenever we caught a pastoralist moving with his cow within Abuja, we ensure that there's a penalty on him. We don't allow this. We have been working with FCT for so long on this. But those that you see roaming the wild, still in the city, they live in the city. They belong to some big men here in the city, not the pastoralists. But they hire the services of the pastoralists to go rear, come back to the house and lock them up.
So sometimes it is not about the resources really, because if they are big men, they should be able to afford ranches. It's sometimes about impunity.
Oh yes, I am with you on this. Oh yes, but my call on the southern governors, they can use this to turn it as a revenue venture. Like I started saying, in Yobe State, we have introduced cattle tax. And this cattle tax will help the Yobe State government in so many things, because it will help in checking incoming foreign pastoralists, distinguishing them from the residence ones from the incoming ones. It will also help in boosting the revenue of the local governments and the state government. It will help in checking the activities of herders. It will also help in confining them in a particular area, so that when there is a farm destruction, you know which family is responsible for destroying whose farm. Then get him pay, impose penalty on him. So the southern governors, we are not blaming the southern governors for this, but all we are saying, there has to be understanding. Let them know the dynamics of this pastoralists, so that they could come up with something that can work for all of us. They can turn this into a revenue venture. They can do it. And the pastoralists will be willing to pay. If you will confine them to a particular area, give them water, there is grass, tell them, we are going to charge you this, they will stay. And it is only and only when you get them in their large numbers, then you begin to also teach them other skills, educate them on the modernized system of animal husbandry. So even in the northern part of the country today, where we have all these grazing reserves, I am telling you, today we have about 80% of the arable land in this country that is still free.
So something
for grazing. So I see no reason why we should be quarreling and fighting on something that we can solve. We have enough land, we have the resources, the pastoralists are there, livestock, if it can be put in the right place, it will help in even boosting the revenue of the federal government. Well, so why can't we do something that can help the government of both North and the South? We are not against all these things. Once it is done in good faith, where our members will be protected, they will be confined to a particular area, what is our problem?
Big question, Mr. Usman Ngazama. I know that this conversation will certainly continue. The bill has not been signed, or the law has not yet been signed into law. I don't know what stage, when it has been passed. What stage is it at before it is signed? It's still a bill, is it?
It is still a bill.
Okay, but it's been passed by the Lagos State House of Assembly, awaiting assent of the Lagos State Governor. We'll see how that conversation is extended when the bill is eventually signed into law. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Bolos Atsen is the chairman of the Nigerian Bar Association here in Abuja, and Usman Baba Ngazama is the national secretary, Miyetti Ala Cattle Breeders Association of Nigeria. Thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Just to state again that a member of the Lagos State House of Assembly was invited and wasn't able to make it to the program. But hopefully, who knows what will happen in the coming days. We have to take a break at this point. We'll be back shortly to have another discussion on another topic. Please stay with us.